This is the lesson for 8-4. What you're doing today is volume combinations, or what they sometimes call composite figures. What you're doing is you're not going to have just a cylinder or just a cone or just a sphere or just a hemisphere. What you're going to do is you are going to have 2 or 3 pictures, and you're going to have them on the same picture. So you're going to have to add together the 2 volumes, or there's going to be other ones that you're going to have to subtract the 2 volumes. So just as a reminder, the radius is half of the diameter. So anytime that you're given the diameter, you have to divide it by 2. The formula for volume of a cylinder: the cylinder is a can. The volume is pi r squared h. Volume of a cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. Formula for volume of a sphere is 4/3 pi r cubed, or to the 3rd power. And volume of a hemisphere is 1/2 times 4/3 pi r cubed, because it's half of a sphere. You're going to use those formulas together today. So you're going to use 2 or 3 formulas on the same problem today. So taking a look at this, in the first question, notice what 2 pictures we have. It says add the volumes together to find the total volume of the composite figure. Notice that we have a hemisphere sitting on top of a cone. So what you want to do is you want to do the hemisphere plus the cone. So the formula, what I find to be very helpful, is to write the formula above what the picture you have. So we have, in this picture, we have a hemisphere. Formula for a hemisphere is 1/2 times 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. Plus, we have the cone. The cone is 1/3 times pi times the radius times the height. So we have 8 different things that we have here. Let's take a look at our picture. For the hemisphere, so the hemisphere is on top. It's almost like an ice cream cone here. We have the hemisphere on top. Notice this 7 is pointing to this line right here. That line is your radius. So the radius of the hemisphere is 7. This 25 is pointing towards this blue line right here. That is the height of the cone. So when you go to plug the numbers into your formula, we have the hemisphere. So we have 1/2 times 4/3 times pi. Those things don't change. What does change is the radius. The radius of the hemisphere is 7. So times 7 to the 3rd power. Plus, we have all the cone stuff. We have the 1/3. We have the pi. We have the radius. The radius of the cone. The radius of the cone and the radius of the hemisphere are the same exact thing. It's that 7. So times 7 squared times the height of the cone, which is 25. You're going to type in all 8 of those things all at once. So 1 divided by 2 times 4 divided by 3 times pi times 7 caret button 3 plus 1 divided by 3 times pi times 7 squared times 25. You type in all of those things all at the same time. When you type them in all at the same time, you should get an answer of 2001.19452. Half of your directions, just like they have been, will say round your answer to the nearest 10th. The 1 is in the 10th place. You have to look at the number after it. That's 5 or higher. So this 1 would round up to be a 2. So we get 2001.2. If your answer said leave it in terms of pi, if we leave it in terms of pi, we need to type in everything except for the pi symbol. So we need to type in 1/2 times 4/3 times 7 to the 3rd power plus 1/3 times 7 squared times 25. We type in everything except for the pi symbols. When we type in all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those things, you're going to get 637, and then you just stick the pi symbol at the end. So you type in everything except for pi, just like we've been doing. that will give you the total volume between the hemisphere and the cone. Take a look at the next one. In this next one, we have so sometimes you need to be careful because they give you the diameter and not the radius. Notice that they're giving you the diameter here. You never want the diameter, you always want the radius. So you wouldn't use the 6 that's there because that represents the diameter. You would have to do 6 divided by 2, which is 3, to use for your radius. So just be careful. Don't just go by the numbers that are on the picture. Sometimes they give you the diameter. Sometimes they'll also try and trick you by writing things upside down. Notice this time it's a cone on top of a hemisphere. So you just got to be very, very careful on what they give you. In this next one, notice that we have a cone sitting on top of a cylinder. So we have a cylinder and we have a cone. Well, the formula for a cylinder is pi r squared h. The formula for a cone is 1/3 pi r squared h. So we have 7 different things that we have here. So looking at the cylinder, all right, looking at the cylinder, the can at the bottom, I can see that this 1 is my radius. This line goes halfway across the circle. So I have pi times your radius, which is 1 squared, times the height of the cylinder. Now, when you look at the height of the cylinder, you have to be very, very careful. All right. In this picture, they tell you that this distance from here to here is 2, but this distance from the top of the cone all the way down to the bottom is 13. Well, if this distance is 2 and the whole thing is 13, that means from here to here has to be 11. All right, that is the height of the cylinder. You have to take and subtract that whole distance of the 13 minus the 2 of the cone, and that gives you a height of 11 for the cylinder. So sometimes they won't always give you the measurements. Sometimes you have to calculate those measurements. Now looking at the cone, so we have our plus sign in the middle to add together our cylinder and our cone, plus 1/3 times pi times the radius, which is still 1. That's the radius for the cone as well. All right. Notice they don't give you this measurement up top either, but the 2 ends of the can, the 2 ends of the cylinder are the same. So that's where we get the 1 and the 1 from. And then we have the height of the cone, which is 2. So you're going to take and type all that right into your calculator. When you take and you type that all right into your calculator, you get 36.65191.429. Round to the nearest tenth, you get 36.7. If we had to do it in terms of pi, you would type in everything except for the pi symbols. So you would type in all of this and all of this, exactly how it says. 1 squared times 11 plus 1/3 times 1 squared times 2. Everything except for the pi symbol, and we would get 11.6 repeating pi. In this next one, sometimes they give you information that you don't need. So in the previous one, they didn't give you the height, they didn't give you the radius, you needed to find them. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they give you extra information that you don't need. For example, this 8, we don't need. We don't need to know how long the slanted part of the cone is. That's just extra information that we don't need. This is the height of the cone right here. Goes to the tip of the cone to the center of the circle. They also give us extra information that we don't need here. We don't need this 24. We don't need to know how tall it is from the top to the bottom. Last time we did, because we weren't given the height of the cylinder. This time we have the height of the cylinder here, the height of the cone here, so we don't need this number at all. So sometimes they will give you extra information that you don't need. So let's take a look at an easier one. We have another hemisphere and a cylinder. The formula for hemisphere is 1/2 times 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. Plus you have your cylinder. The formula for a cylinder is pi r squared h. So you have those 7 things. So we have the 1/2, we have the 4/3, we have the pi. Those don't change because they're part of the formula. Looking at our hemisphere, the radius is 10. So times 10 to the 3rd power. Then you have your plus sign, pi, times your radius of your cylinder. Now the radius of the hemisphere and the radius of the cylinder are the same exact thing because it goes halfway across that circle. So it's times 10 to the 2nd power. And then the height of the cylinder is 16. You're going to take and type that whole thing into the calculator. You're going to get 7,120.943348 rounded to the nearest 10th. You get 7,120.9. If we had to do it in terms of pi, you would type in everything except for the pi symbol. So we would do 1/2 times 4/3 times 10 to the 3rd plus 10 squared times 16, everything except for the pi symbol. And you would get 2,266.6 repeating pi. Sometimes you're going to have 3 shapes. In this one, this is a 3-way composite figure. You have a cone on the top, a cylinder in the middle, and a hemisphere on the bottom. So we want to add together the cone plus the cylinder plus the hemisphere. So for the cone, the formula is 1/3 pi r squared h. Plus you have the cylinder, pi r squared h. Plus you have the hemisphere, 1/2 times 4/3 times pi times the radius cubed. So you have 8, 9, 10, 11 things there that we have to worry about. So looking at the cone first, looking at the cone at the top, we have our 1/3 times pi, the radius of the cone. The radius of the cone is right here at the top. That is 1.5 squared times the height of the cone, which is 2. Plus, now we have our cylinder. We have pi times the radius squared. The radius of the cylinder is the same thing as the cone. It's 1.5 squared times the height of the cylinder. The height of the cylinder is right there, 3.5. Plus 1/2 times 4/3 times pi times the radius of the hemisphere. The radius of the hemisphere is right here. That is another 1.5. So times 1.5 to the 3rd. Is that a lot to have to type into your calculator all at once? Yes, but there's 3 shapes. So just go ahead and type in that whole thing right into the calculator. Don't forget to put in your plus signs. If you do that correctly, you should get 36.5210146. 5 is in the tens place. You need to look at the number after it. That's 4 or lower, so that stays the same, 36.5. If you have to put it in terms of pi, you would type in everything except for the pi symbol. So you're going to type in everything that I circled in the red. Make sure that you put the plus signs in the appropriate spots. If you do that correctly, you should get 11.625 pi. So those were adding ones. Where you might see this in real life, if you ever go to a farm and you look at a hopper bin where they put like corn that they harvest or whatever, notice right here you have a cone at the top, and then you have a cylinder in the middle, and then you have another cone here at the bottom. All right, so you'd have to do the cylinder plus the cone plus the cone. Sometimes you're going to have to do subtracting questions. This is like a combo with the pretzel on the outside and the cheese on the inside. I'm sure at some point you've sucked the cheese out of a combo. All right, if you suck the cheese out of the combo, what we're finding is the pretzel shell. We're finding the volume of the pretzel, so minus the cheese. So in this one, you are doing the big cylinder minus the little cylinder. we're taking out that cheese cylinder from the middle. So we have the formula is the big cylinder minus the little cylinder because we're taking out the cheese and just finding the shell. So we have pi r squared h minus pi r squared h. So looking at the big cylinder, we have pi times the radius of the big cylinder. Now notice that they give you the diameter right here. The diameter is 7. We never want the diameter, we want the radius. So that radius is going to be 3.5 when we divide. So pi times 3.5 squared times the height. The height is clearly 9. Minus, now we're looking at the little cylinder. For the little cylinder, notice that you have a diameter again. This goes all the way across the little part, the part of the cheese. So if the diameter is 3, divided by 2 is 1.5 for your radius of the little cylinder. So pi times 1.5 squared times the height, which is again 9. Type that whole thing into the calculator, round your answer to the nearest tenth, you get 282.7. If we go to put it in terms of pi, you type in everything except for the pi symbol. So make sure you put your minus sign in there and you would get 90 pi. So again, if you're looking for the volume of the remaining figure, you have to do the bigger one minus the little one. So sometimes you have a different shape like this. You have a cylinder in this one, and we're taking out this cone, all right? Here's the cone that we're taking out, all right? We're taking out this cone. So we're removing the cone, and we just have this weird shape that's left. So we need to do the bigger shape minus the smaller shape, the cylinder minus the cone. So we have pi r squared h minus 1/3 pi r squared h. So for the cylinder, we have pi times the radius. The radius is going to be 6 squared times the height, which is 10, minus 1/3 times pi times your radius of the cone this time is still 6. And coincidentally or not, the height of the cone is 10. So you're going to take that and type that whole thing into the calculator, round your answer to the nearest tenth, you would get 754.0. If we had to leave it in terms of pi, you have to type in everything except for the pi symbol, and you would get 240 pi. So again, we're doing the bigger shape minus the smaller shape. In this case, it's the cylinder minus the cone because we're taking the cone out. This one is a little bit weird as well. We have a big cone and we have a little cone. What is the volume of the remaining figure when the smaller cone is removed? So we're taking this smaller cone and chopping it off, all right? We're taking a knife and going right like that and cutting the top part off. And we just want to find the volume of this remaining piece at the bottom. So we have the big cone minus the small cone. So we have 1/3 pi r squared h minus 1/3 pi r squared h. So we have 1/3 times pi. The radius of the big cone is right here. Now it says right at the top, it gives you your measurements. The radius of the larger one is 8, the smaller one is 4. So times 8 squared. The height of the cone is right here, that is 14. Minus 1/3 times pi times your radius of the small cone, which is 4, times the height of the small cone, which is 7. Type all that into the calculator, round your answer to the nearest tenth, we get 821.0. If we had to leave it in terms of pi, you have 1/3 times 8 squared minus times 14 minus 1/3 times 4 times 7, and you would get 261.3 repeating pi when you type that into the calculator. So again, you need to be careful on these questions. Sometimes they give you a problem that you have to add the pieces together. Sometimes they give you a question where you need to subtract the pieces. What you really need to be careful of are your formulas at the very beginning. All right. Remember, these are the formulas that you need to use. I think it's helpful to write them down, just like I was doing, so that you don't miss any pieces. It's very easy to miss a part and piece of each one of these. So I think it's easier to write like hemisphere plus cone, or cone plus cone, big cone minus small cone. Write the formulas underneath them so that you can go back and sub in your parts and pieces and then solve it. Don't forget to type in your plus signs or your minus signs wherever appropriate. Again, these are the formulas that you need to use.